Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington DC. I'm Nick Harper, and in the next 30 minutes or so, we'll get you all the updates on stories developing around the world. But first, let's take a look at the headlines. US and NATO troops leave Afghanistan's Bagram Airbase in entirety, leaving their main military base in the hands of Afghan forces and signalling that the complete withdrawal is on course for September the 11th. The Trump Organization and its long-time financial chief plead not guilty in a sweeping tax probe. The outcome of the high-stakes trial could impact Trump's relationships with banks and his future political career. "679 people have died in Russia in the last 24 hours from COVID-19, the highest number of deaths in a single day since the pandemic began. But the Kremlin says it is not considering new lockdown measures despite the recent surge. Tokyo Olympics organisers warn they are prepared to hold the Games behind closed doors as virus cases rise, leaving ticket holders in limbo just 3 weeks before the opening ceremony. The space race for billionaires is heating up. Richard Branson one-ups rival Jeff Bezos, announcing that he too will blast off beyond Earth's atmosphere 9 days ahead of the Amazon founder. Norwegian Karsten Warholm breaks the longest-standing world record in men's track events. The double world champion goes faster than ever in the 400 metres hurdles at the Oslo Diamond League. Bagram Airbase, the heart of the American military in Afghanistan, and it's been vacated by the US troops after almost 20 years. The withdrawal of the troops from the Bagram Airbase marks the end of an era and a possible resumption of war in the region. Built by the Soviets in the 1950s and commandeered by the US military in the wake of 9/11, Bagram Airbase today stands as a veritable citadel behind fences and blast walls. It's about an hour's drive from Kabul, and Bagram is where the US military coordinated its air, war and logistical support for its entire Afghan mission. It was there, on the bullet-ridden Soviet-built airstrip surrounded by snow-capped Hindu Kush mountains, that the New York City firefighters and police were flown to bury a piece of the World Trade Center back in December 2001.
According to the information that we have, American forces left Bagram Airbase last night without any coordination with the District Administrative Office, the Governor's Office, or other relevant administrations. This has not been officially coordinated and reported to us, but from the ground, we get this information from the situation in the area, as several looters, opportunists, and others stormed Bagram Airfield this morning, and with a quick response from our district administration, we were able to foil their plans. The deployment of the army has started to take over the security posts and security towers previously guarded by Americans to have their presence in those areas for the security of Bagram Airbase.
Now, a top US commander has warned that Afghanistan may descend into a civil war without the presence of foreign troops. This as Taliban fighters are sweeping into districts around the country and making territorial gains. June was the deadliest month in 2 decades. Afghanistan National Security and Defence Forces have killed over 6,000 Taliban terrorists. The Taliban have launched relentless offences across Afghanistan in the past 2 months, and reports say that 638 military personnel and civilians have been killed in Taliban attacks. More than 1,000 people have also been injured. Almost 120 districts have now been evacuated by the Afghan government. Kabul residents have welcomed the withdrawal of troops from Bagram. Many, however, though, remain concerned over the current situation in the country.
It's good that they are leaving the country. The bad thing is that the situation has turned bad in Afghanistan. When they were here, there were lots of people working. Now there are no jobs. People have lost their jobs.
We are neither happy nor upset about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. We had peaceful lives when the Americans were here. No one can say anything to them. They are returning to their homes. It has been a year that they have destroyed the whole area here. This used to be the wall of the Bagram airfield. Since they started the withdrawal, the situation has got worse. There is no work, there is joblessness, there is no business for people.
Some US security officials said this week the majority of US military personnel could most likely be gone by July the 4th, with a small number of troops remaining to protect the embassy. President Joe Biden had promised to complete the withdrawal from Afghanistan by September the 11th, the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. In its annual Trafficking in Persons report, the US State Department has added Pakistan and Turkey to its Child Soldiers Prevention Act list. The list includes governments that have used children as part of armed forces. Designated countries could face strict sanctions on military assistance from the United States. Here's our report.
In a major setback for Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, the United States has added Pakistan to its Child Soldiers Prevention Act list, a designation that could lead to strict sanctions on military assistance and the country's participation in peacekeeping programs. Turkey has also been added to the list by the US State Department in its annual Trafficking Persons report. The State Department, under the US Child Soldiers Prevention Act, releases an annual list of foreign governments that have recruited or used child soldiers in the previous year. The 2021 CSPA list includes Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkey, Myanmar, Congo, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Mali, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, Venezuela and Yemen. Congo, Somalia and Yemen have been on the list since 2010. In 2010, the CSPA list identified 6 governments. A decade later, the number stood at 14 and 15 in 2021. The State Department defines the term child soldier as any person under 18 years of age who takes a direct part in hostilities as a member of governmental armed forces, police or other security forces. The term child soldier also applies to a person who is serving in any capacity, including in a support role such as a cook, porter, messenger, medic, guard or sex slave. The CSPA prohibits listed governments to be part of US peacekeeping programs and also prohibits issuance of licenses for direct commercial sales of military equipment. The restrictions will be applied to listed governments from the 1st of October this year and will be effective throughout fiscal year 2022. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The COVID-19 pandemic has not just put the global healthcare system and the economy under stress, it has also led to many other serious problems. In a report, the US State Department has said that the pandemic has created an ideal environment for human trafficking to thrive. The report says that as governments divert resources to the health crisis, traffickers are taking advantage of vulnerable people. The 2021 Trafficking in Persons report also downgraded several countries and upgraded others for their efforts to combat human trafficking.
Trafficking in persons is an appalling crime. It's a global crisis. It's an enormous source of human suffering. The estimate we often cite is that nearly 25 million people worldwide are victims of human trafficking. Many are compelled into commercial sex work. Many are forced to work in factories or fields or to join armed groups. Millions of trafficking victims are children. This crime is an affront to human rights. It's an affront to human dignity.
The Biden administration designated 17 countries as not doing enough to tackle the problem and even warned of potential US sanctions.
We document 11 countries where the government itself is the trafficker. For example, through forced labor on public work projects or in sectors of the economy that the government feels are particularly important. For the 10th year in a row, the report documents how the Cuban government has profited from exploitative overseas medical missions.
Secretary of State Blinken singled out the Chinese government over the detention of Uyghur Muslims in camps in Xinjiang. He added that many of the 1 million detained people are subjected to physical violence, sexual abuse and torture.
We also report on what's happening in Xinjiang, in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China. The Chinese government has detained more than 1 million people in as many as 1,200 state-run internment camps throughout Xinjiang. Many detainees are subjected to physical violence, sexual abuse, and torture to induce them to work, producing apparel, electronics, solar equipment, agricultural products. And while the practices are the most egregious in Xinjiang, this year's report notes that China has subjected its citizens to coercive labor practices in other parts of the country as well.
6 US partner countries, Cyprus, Israel, New Zealand, Norway, Portugal and Switzerland, were downgraded from the top Tier 1 category to Tier 2, which means they do not meet international standards for fighting trafficking, but are making significant efforts to do so. Former US President Donald Trump's company and its longtime finance chief have been charged with tax fraud. Prosecutors have called the charges sweeping and audacious. It's the first criminal case to come out of nearly 3 years of investigations into Trump's business dealings. Let's first take a look at the major takeaways. The Trump Organization has been charged for providing off-the-record compensation to Alan Weisselberg and other unidentified executives. Alan Weisselberg is the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization. Both parties have pleaded not guilty. Weisselberg received $1.76 million in indirect compensation. This includes things like rent on his Manhattan apartment, annual lease payments on 2 cars, beds, televisions, and even cash payments. His alleged tax evasion amounts to $900,000. Donald Trump and his adult children who run the Trump Organization have neither been charged nor accused of any wrongdoing. The 15-count indictment includes a charge of larceny against Weisselberg. This carries a maximum prison term of 15 years. According to the indictment, the scheme to defraud tax authorities began back in 2005 and has been continuing to this day. The next hearing is on September the 20th. Weisselberg has closely worked with Trump for around 6 decades now. He's a loyal lieutenant, also known as a gatekeeper of the family's secrets. Trump's 2 eldest sons and Weisselberg took control of the company when Trump entered the White House in 2017. The company owns golf clubs, hotels and luxury properties. The case is being led by Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Both of them are Democrats. Vance has been investigating a wide range of matters involving the Trump Organization. He's been closely looking at hush money payments made to women, falsification of property value to obtain loans, and tax evasion. The indictment comes at a time when Trump is seriously exploring the possibility of mounting a challenge against incumbent Joe Biden in the 2024 presidential election. Trump has condemned the charges and called the case a political witch hunt by the radical left Democrats. His defense team voiced the same concern.
We'll win this case, but this case should have never been brought. It is a political prosecution. Political prosecutions where people are targeted criminally because the prosecutors disagree with their political beliefs happen in corrupt countries. It does not happen in America. It's un-American. It should not happen here in New York City, the greatest city and the greatest democracy in the world. Should not have occurred, and it is a sad day in New York.
The world's billionaires are in a race to be the first into space. The latest entrant is Virgin Galactic founder Richard Branson, who's revealed that his plan is to blast off aboard the company's test flight on July the 11th. That's 9 days ahead of Jeff Bezos's July 20th launch. Our next report has all the details.
There's a new favorite to win the race for first billionaire in space. Virgin Galactic announced Thursday that founder Richard Branson will be blasting off aboard its test flight on July 11th. That's 9 days ahead of Amazon's Jeff Bezos and his rival space tourism venture Blue Origin. It's the fourth crewed mission by Virgin. A full crew, including Branson, 2 pilots, and 3 other specialists. The launch will take them to the edge of space. Beyond the Earth's atmosphere, passengers will be able to experience a few minutes of weightlessness. A successful flight would mark a key milestone for an ambitious new industry hoping to go mainstream. In a statement, Branson said that private commercial spaceflight is, quote, set to open space to humankind and change the world for good. After 2 more test flights, Virgin says it will throw open the hatch to welcome tourists in 2022. The billionaire race to space also includes SpaceX chief executive Elon Musk. Musk has not set a date for his spaceflight.
Anger among people in Canada is mounting as more and more unmarked graves with remains of children at former Indigenous schools are being discovered. In Winnipeg, protesters toppled statues of Britain's Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II. The crowd chanted "No pride in genocide" before pulling down the statues of the monarchs. The crowd cheered as Queen Victoria's statue fell outside the Manitoba provincial legislature. Protesters also kicked the toppled statue and danced around it. The pedestal and the statue were daubed in red paint hand marks. A nearby statue of the current head of state of Canada, Queen Elizabeth II, was also pulled down. Local media say that police used a stun gun to arrest a man at the scene, but the protests were largely peaceful. The incident took place on Canada Day. That's July the 1st, when traditionally celebrations take place across the country. Many cities, however, this year scrapped celebrations over the mushrooming abuse scandal. So far, over 1,000 unmarked graves have been discovered at former residential schools in British Columbia. These schools were operated by the Catholic Church on behalf of the federal government from 1912 until the early 1970s. Between the 1800s and 1900s, more than 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend these residential schools. A third wave of COVID-19 infections is sweeping across Africa. Hospitals are full with patients and countries are beginning now to order new lockdowns. Vaccination levels across Africa are extremely low, and that's raising concerns over the continent's resistance against coronavirus. Here's a report.
A third wave of coronavirus infections and slow vaccination are causing widespread anger and worry in Africa. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of South Africa's capital Pretoria to demand a faster vaccine rollout. Infections are rising sharply in the continent's worst-hit country, driven by the highly contagious Delta variant. South Africa is approaching 2 million recorded cases and has already suffered nearly 60,000 deaths. The government has raised the health alert to level 4, the last stage before a total lockdown. All gatherings except funerals are prohibited, schools are shut, and an overnight curfew extended by an hour. President Cyril Ramaphosa justified the measures to battle what he called this devastating wave.
We don't know how long this one will last, but indications are that it could last longer.
The situation has been deteriorating across the continent since mid-May, with the arrival of new vaccine deliveries slowing to a trickle. Less than 1% of the continent's population is fully vaccinated, according to the World Health Organization.
With rapidly rising case numbers and increasing reports of serious illness, the latest surge threatens to be Africa's worst yet. The epidemic is resurging in 12 African countries, and we are closely monitoring rising cases in another 14.
The resurgence is piling pressure on already struggling hospitals, like in Tunisia. Beja is one of 4 regions where a new lockdown is in place.
With 80 beds equipped with an oxygen source, almost the whole hospital has been converted into a COVID ward, including all hospital departments.
Uganda has also been under a new lockdown since mid-June, set to last for 6 weeks. Police patrol the streets of the capital Kampala to enforce restrictions and arrest street vendors. In the Nakasero market, traders sleep on the spot to be able to keep selling. With no other means to make a living, hundreds of people camp out on the concrete. Daily cases have increased in the past 3 weeks from fewer than 100 to more than 1,700, and hospitals are in desperate need of oxygen.
At the moment, I would say we are able to supply according to the demand, because on average of 300 to 400 cylinders a day, all that is coming in, we are able to refill them at least within a maximum of 8 to 12 hours. Before COVID, we could produce maybe like for 40 to 50 cylinders, depending on the demand.
In Uganda, as elsewhere, limited supplies and apathy are behind low vaccination levels. Africa is the world's second least affected continent after Oceania, but health experts warn over future risks if Africans are not vaccinated.
In Chile, this ski season will see aficionados of the sport back on the slopes of Santiago as ski resorts reopen after nearly a year of being closed due to coronavirus. Chile has been leading in immunisation rates in Latin America. However, restrictive measures to avoid further outbreaks will remain in place. Here's our report.
Ski resorts in Santiago generally open for the ski season in mid to late July. And if the weather is particularly friendly, these resorts stay open until mid-October. However, 2020 was a little different. No, scratch that. 2020 was a wholly different story. We don't need to explain why.
I've been waiting for this for such a long time. Last year I was unable to go. I was really looking out for the reopening date.
Chile, like many other countries, was forced to tighten its borders. As per official figures, this led to a 92.6% drop in revenue from international tourism in the first 5 months of this year. Hoping to recoup pandemic losses, this year ski fields will be open to visitors, something the ski enthusiasts have been desperately waiting for. The COVID-19 pandemic had robbed them of the simple joys of life. But now, fields at the El Colorado and Valle Nevado ski centers will be welcoming visitors and tourists.
Last year, I couldn't ski, so after 2 years of not skiing, I need to take advantage.
Chile has been hailed for its fast-paced and successful immunization program. The country has been leading in Latin America in terms of inoculations. The country had swiftly struck a clutch of deals with manufacturers. And as per recent data, records show that 55.6% of the population of Chile has been fully vaccinated. But of course, the ski resorts are still being cautious. In order to avoid another outbreak, these resorts will see some of the restrictive measures still in place, such as face masks and physical distancing. This year will most likely also see a drop in footfall, between 500,000 to 600,000 compared to about 1 million in pre-pandemic seasons. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
And a psychic cat from Russia has predicted Spain's victory over Switzerland in the upcoming quarter-final match in the Euro 2020 tournament. Take a look at which team Achilles the cat chose. We'll leave you with these visuals. Thanks for watching WION Live Broadcast.
one World Trade Center that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr.
America is a constant work in progress.